The operating room fell silent. Dr. Margaret Foster's gloved hands trembled as surgical forceps gripped something that shouldn't exist. 25 years of experience vanished in an instant. The harsh overhead lights caught metal where there should only be soft tissue. A bullet fragment, deformed and tarnished, embedded deep within her patient's neck. "Get pathology in here, now!" Her voice barely steady. The resident leaned closer, then stepped back. On the fragment's flattened surface, crude, hand-carved letters caught the light. DS 11-1465, Brother's Keeper. Robert Harrison, Bobby to those who knew him, had hidden this lump beneath turtlenecks for 18 years. His granddaughter's intervention finally brought him to surgery. The team expected routine fatty tissue. Instead, they found impossibility. Someone had carved a message on this bullet before it entered Bobby's body 58 years ago. The question wasn't medical anymore. It was personal. How did it get there? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Robert Bobby Harrison was 71 years old, though the military posture never left his spine. Retired high school English teacher, silver hair always neat. A collection of 47 turtlenecks in earth tones filled his closet, a detail his granddaughter Grace had counted once, concerned by the obsession. He lived alone in Riverside, Montana, population 8,500. A town small enough that everyone knew the man who taught their children Shakespeare but never spoke of his own past. His house sat orderly to the point of obsession. One photograph in the study, a military unit, 1965, young faces staring at the camera with the innocence of men who didn't yet know what war would take. Every morning, Bobby drank coffee in silence and stared at the mountains. Every November 14th, he drank bourbon alone. He'd avoided Veterans Day events for 40 years, despite annual invitations. His journal opened each day with the same line he'd written for decades, though no one knew what it said. 2 adult sons, Michael, 45, and Thomas, 42, called weekly out of duty. The conversations stayed polite, distant. Something had broken in those relationships long ago, though neither side could name exactly when. Grace Harrison, 23, was different. Biology major, pre-med track at the University of Montana. She had her grandmother's green eyes and the same stubborn determination that refused to accept no as an answer. When Bobby said the lump was just fat, nothing to worry about, Grace organized what she called a loving coup with her uncles. They'd forced him to the hospital finally, after 18 years of watching him hide beneath high collars, even in summer heat. Catherine, Kate to everyone who loved her, had been dead 12 years. Ovarian cancer, 2012. 42 years of marriage to a man who kept his demons locked behind silence. Her reading glasses still sat on the nightstand. Her garden of forget-me-nots bloomed each spring without her. In the study, her empty desk held a bookmark frozen in The Things They Carried, marking a page she'd never finish. Dr. Margaret Foster, 45, had performed thousands of surgeries. She approached medicine with scientific precision and human compassion. But nothing in 25 years had prepared her for a bullet fragment with a hand-carved message lodged in a patient who'd reported no combat history. The surgery revealed more than a foreign object. It opened a doorway to 58 years of secrets. Grace held her grandfather's hand in pre-op. Bobby's fingers trembled slightly as he insisted on keeping his wedding ring on despite protocol. The anesthesiologist noted elevated heart rate, anxiety markers consistent with a man who'd avoided doctors for nearly 2 decades. "I'll be right here when you wake up, Grandpa." Grace squeezed his hand. Bobby touched his neck one last time, whispered something inaudible, and surrendered to darkness. Dr. Foster expected routine, a simple lipoma excision, 30 minutes, Home by evening. The initial incision revealed otherwise. The tissue consistency felt wrong immediately. Dense, where it should have been soft. Fibrous, where it should have yielded. She went deeper. Metal caught the light. Her forceps found resistance. The extraction required careful manipulation, working the object free from decades of encapsulation. When it finally emerged, the entire surgical team stopped. A bullet fragment, thumbnail-sized, deformed by impact. .45 caliber, consistent with military issue from another era. The surrounding tissue told its own story. Dense scar tissue, the body's attempt to wall off a foreign invader to make peace with what couldn't be expelled. But it was the engraving that made Dr. Foster's breath catch. Crude letters carved by hand, possibly with a combat knife. The metal had preserved them perfectly, protected by the very tissue that had hidden them. DS 11-14-65, Brother's Keeper. Photograph everything, Dr. Foster ordered. Document the position, the encapsulation, all of it. And someone call pathology. This isn't routine anymore. The resident's hand covered her mask. Doctor, the patient file says no combat history. I know what the file says. 3 hours later, Bobby drifted from anesthesia's grip. The first sensation was lightness at the base of his neck. 18 years of weight suddenly absent. Grace sat beside the bed, her eyes red from crying. Doctor. Foster waited with the sterile container in her hands. Mr. Harrison, the surgery went well. She paused, choosing words carefully. But we found something unexpected. Bobby's vision focused slowly on the container. Through the fog of medication, he saw metal. His body recognized it before his mind did. Military instinct never fully dies. Grace handed him his reading glasses. His hands shook as he read the engraving. The color drained from his face completely. The heart monitor spiked, alarms chirping. A nurse moved forward with a sedative, but Bobby waved her away. Danny, he whispered. Just the one word, broken. Mr. Harrison? Dr. Foster leaned closer. You know this person? Daniel Sullivan. Bobby's voice cracked on the name. My best friend. November 14th, 1965. IA Drang Valley. Vietnam. The room waited. We were in the same unit. 1st Cavalry Division. Bobby's hand trembled as he reached toward the container, stopped short of touching it. He carved this the night before the battle, on his lucky bullet, said if anything happened, someone would know. His eyes closed, tears tracking down weathered cheeks. I held his hand when he died. I watched him stop breathing. I left him in the mud when they dragged me to the helicopter. Dr. Foster's clinical mask slipped. Mr. Harrison, this bullet has been inside you for 58 years. Your body encapsulated it, protected it. The engraving, Brother's Keeper. Do you know what he meant? Bobby's face contorted with memory and grief. It's from the Bible. Cain and Abel. Am I my brother's keeper? He looked at the fragment, at Danny's initials carved into metal that had somehow ended up inside him. He promised we'd watch out for each other, that we'd keep each other safe. His voice dropped to barely audible. But I didn't keep him safe. I let him die. That evening, Bobby slept fitfully under sedation. Grace sat in the chair beside his bed, laptop glowing in the dim room. Her determination had a practiced quality. This wasn't spontaneous research. Her browser history told a different story, one Bobby didn't know yet. She'd been preparing for this moment for 2 years. Grace had found Kate's boxes in the attic when she was 21, letters postmarked from Idaho, a name repeating across decades, D. Sullivan. Her grandmother's journals referenced helping Bobby heal without explanation. Grace had done what her generation did best. She'd searched the internet until she found answers. Daniel Sullivan, Twin Falls, Idaho. Physical therapist specializing in veteran rehabilitation. Alive. The surgery hadn't been a family intervention born from sudden concern. It had been Grace's carefully orchestrated plan, manipulation disguised as love. She'd known the surgery would reveal something, though the bullet fragment's existence had surprised even her. Now she searched military databases with focused intensity. The National Archives had digitized records 5 years ago, making accessible what had once required physical visits to Washington. She typed, Daniel Sullivan, 1st Cavalry Division, 1965. Multiple results appeared. She narrowed by unit number, age, date range. The first record made her chest tighten. Sullivan, Daniel Patrick, status KIA 11-14-1965. Grace's face showed no surprise. She scrolled further, knowing what she'd find. A secondary record, dated November 15th, amended the first. Status KIA amended to MIA. Subject recovered alive, 11-14-1965, 20:47 hours. The medical repatriation file told the full story. Field hospital records showed critical condition, multiple injuries, coma. The medevac had arrived 8 minutes after Bobby's extraction. They'd found Danny with a pulse so faint the initial assessment had declared him dead. But battlefield medics didn't give up easily. Transport logs tracked his journey from field hospital to Walter Reed. 6 months in a coma. Severe spinal trauma, paralysis below the waist. 2 years of rehabilitation before discharge in 1968, the same year Bobby returned home. Grace screenshot everything, her hands steady. She'd suspected this truth, but confirmation still hit hard. Her grandfather had lived 58 years believing a lie, not because anyone intended to deceive him, but because war created chaos where truth drowned in blood and confusion. The printer in the hospital business center hummed as she compiled evidence. She organized it carefully in a folder, building a case like a lawyer preparing for trial. Bobby woke near midnight. The sedatives were wearing off, leaving him vulnerable, defenses down. Grace sat close, the folder in her lap. "Grandpa, I need to tell you something." She opened the folder, showed him the first page, military database, official seal at the top. "I found Danny." Bobby's confusion showed through the medication haze. "What do you mean, found?" "He didn't die, Grandpa." Grace's voice was gentle but firm. "He survived." "That's not possible." Bobby's voice rose, the heart monitor responding to his agitation. "I was there, Grace. I held him. He wasn't breathing. His eyes—" "You watched him dying," Grace interrupted. "But 8 minutes after they pulled you out, a medevac arrived. They found him alive. Barely, but alive." She showed him the records one by one, medevac logs, Walter Reed admission papers, medical discharge documentation dated 1968. A current address in Twin Falls, Idaho, updated as recently as 2020. Bobby shook his head, denial automatic after nearly 6 decades. "Military makes mistakes. Records get confused." "It's not—" "There are photos, Grandpa." Grace turned her phone. "From a veterans event last year." The face on the screen was older, silver-haired, weathered by time and pain. But the eyes were unmistakable. Danny's eyes, still sharp, still alive, staring out from a motorized wheelchair. The psychological foundation Bobby had built his entire adult life on began to crack. Everything. The nightmares, the distance from his family, the bourbon on November 14th, the guilt that had shaped every decision for 58 years, all of it rested on a single, terrible memory. A memory that was wrong. "He's alive right now?" Bobby's voice broke on the question. "Living in Idaho. Has been since he was discharged." Grace paused, then delivered the blow she'd been holding back. "Grandpa, there's something else." Grandma knew. She's known since 1982. Bobby stared at her, unable to process another impossibility. Grace pulled out letters, yellowed with age, organized by year. 347 of them she'd counted, hidden in Kate's attic boxes, a secret correspondence spanning 3 decades. She wrote to Danny for 30 years. She knew he was alive. She knew where he was. Grace's voice cracked. The letters explain why she never told you, but first, she met her grandfather's eyes. Do you want to see him? Bobby looked at the bullet fragment in its sterile container on the bedside table. At Danny's carved promise, brother's keeper. At the proof that impossible things could be true. Call him, Bobby whispered. Tell him I'm coming. Grace's face showed relief and guilt in equal measure. I already did, 2 days ago. Day 2 brought medical progress but psychological turmoil. Bobby's surgical wound healed normally, pain managed with medication that left him floating at the edges of reality. He walked hospital corridors building strength, but his mind stayed elsewhere, trapped between past and present, between what he'd believed and what might be true. Michael and Thomas arrived from Seattle that afternoon, summoned by Grace. They found their father vulnerable for the first time in memory, and the awkwardness of decades showed in stilted conversation and uncertain touches. Dad, why didn't you ever talk about the war? Michael asked finally. Bobby couldn't answer. The trauma lived too deep for words even now. Grace had brought Kate's boxes from the attic. Michael had driven back to retrieve them. 347 letters, organized chronologically, representing 30 years of secret correspondence between Bobby's wife and the friend he'd believed dead. Grace read systematically, patterns emerging through her grandmother's careful documentation. The early letters from 1982 through 1985 showed Kate learning about trauma, asking Danny detailed questions about the war, about Bobby's behavior in those days before the guilt fully calcified. One letter from 1985 stopped Grace cold. Kate had written to Danny about consulting Dr. Morrison, a trauma specialist at the VA. His professional opinion stated clearly, Bobby isn't ready to know you're alive. The guilt is structural to his psyche now. Remove it suddenly, and he might break completely. The doctor had used an analogy about supporting walls in houses. Take one out without preparation, and everything collapses. Dr. Morrison's recommended timeline, 20 to 30 years, watching for signs of readiness. Kate had committed to waiting however long it took. Another letter from 1989 documented something Grace hadn't expected. Kate had flown to Idaho, met Danny in person while Bobby believed she was attending a library conference. The follow-up letter described Danny as exactly as I imagined, kind, forgiving, carrying his own pain with remarkable grace. Most importantly, he holds no anger toward Bobby. None at all. Bobby's guilt is entirely self-inflicted. That realization had shifted Kate's mission. She wasn't just waiting to reveal truth. She was building a bridge that Bobby could cross when ready. The 1995 letter made Grace's hands shake. Kate had brought Michael, then 16, to meet Danny. A secret weekend trip disguised as a father-son college tour. Michael had spent hours with Danny, learning the full story, crying when he understood the depth of his father's unnecessary suffering. Danny had taught Michael about trauma, about patience, about loving someone through their brokenness. Michael had promised not to tell Bobby until Kate said the time was right. Which meant Bobby's family, wife and sons, had known for 29 years, everyone except Bobby himself. Grace showed her grandfather 5 carefully selected letters. She wasn't ready to reveal that his sons had known. That betrayal felt too large, too devastating. Bobby needed to understand Kate's motivation first. Bobby read in silence, tears tracking down his face. Grace watched understanding war with anger, gratitude battle with feelings of betrayal. When he finished, he looked at his granddaughter with eyes that held decades of pain. "She didn't trust me," he said quietly. "She loved you too much to risk breaking you," Grace corrected. Bobby processed this, the distinction between trust and protection, between honesty and love. Kate had carried his burden secretly for 30 years, suffering his distance and silence while working behind the scenes for his eventual healing. She'd died without seeing her plan come to fruition, trusting that someday, when Bobby was strong enough, he'd find his way to Danny. On day 3, Dr. Foster cleared Bobby for travel with restrictions. No heavy lifting, watch for signs of infection, return immediately if fever developed. She handed him the sterile container with the bullet fragment. "Some mysteries need solving," she said gently. Bobby packed carefully and, despite everything, reached for a turtleneck. Grace touched his arm. "Grandpa, you don't need to hide anymore." "Old habits," he said, but there was something different in his voice. The scar would be visible now, a badge instead of a shame, though instinct still pulled toward concealment. Day 4 began before dawn. Grace loaded her car with overnight bags and Kate's box of letters. The route from Montana to Idaho wound through back roads, scenic but long. 6 hours of mountain passes and small towns, of silence and careful conversation. Bobby stared out the window at mountains he'd lived among for 40 years, but had never really seen. His hand kept going to his pocket where the bullet fragment rested, wrapped in gauze. Grace tried conversation. Bobby managed mostly single words. 2 hours in, they stopped at a diner in a small Montana town. Classic American breakfast, vinyl booths, coffee in thick mugs. A veteran sat at the counter wearing a Vietnam cap, a Drang survivor. Bobby froze. The veteran turned, saw Bobby's age and bearing, recognized a fellow soldier. He nodded, one warrior to another. Bobby couldn't move, couldn't approach, couldn't bridge 40 years of self-imposed isolation in a single moment. When the waitress brought their check, she smiled. The gentleman at the counter took care of it. "Said to tell you, welcome home, brother." Bobby made it to the parking lot before breaking down. Grace held her grandfather while decades of held grief poured out in racking sobs. It was the first time she'd seen him cry. Back in the car, Bobby finally talked. Fragments of story emerged, landing in Drang, the fear, the chaos. Danny's friendship as the only thing that kept him sane. The night before battle when Danny carved his lucky bullet by flashlight. The explosion, the blood, watching Danny go still in his arms. "I should have reached him sooner," Bobby said. "But you did reach him. That's why he lived." "I left him. I got on that helicopter. You followed orders. You had no choice, Grandpa." At a rest stop with a view of endless mountains, Grace made her own confession. She'd known about Danny for 2 years. She'd found him through internet searches, contacted him, planned everything. The surgery, the timing, the revelation, all orchestrated by her. "I'm sorry for deceiving you," she said, crying. "But you'd still be suffering if I hadn't." Bobby surprised her. No anger, just weary acceptance. "You're like her, like Kate." "Taking on my burden. Is that fair to you, Grace? Carrying what isn't yours?" "I just wanted you to be happy, Grandpa." Bobby touched her face gently. "I don't know if I remember how." Approaching the Idaho state line, panic seized Bobby's chest. Hyperventilating, pain radiating, Grace pulled over and talked him through breathing exercises. "What if he hates me?" Bobby gasped. "He doesn't. He's been waiting for you." "What if I can't forgive myself?" "Maybe that's what you'll learn from him." Grace offered to turn back. Bobby looked at the bullet fragment, at Danny's carved promise, and shook his head. No, I need to finish this. Twin Falls looked like Riverside, small, quiet, American flags on porches. Danny's address led them to a single-story house with a wheelchair ramp. The garden showed meticulous care. Someone lived here who paid attention, who found meaning in small beauties. "Ready?" Grace asked, parking. "No." "But let's go anyway." Bobby combed his hair, checked his shirt, touched the scar at his neck repeatedly. Grace offered to walk with him, but Bobby needed these first moments alone with Danny. Grace would wait in the car, keeping the bullet fragment safe because Bobby was afraid he'd need it as proof or shield. 8 steps from car to porch. Bobby counted each one. The wheelchair ramp made Danny's sacrifice visceral. Wind chimes sounded, triggering memory of Danny saying he loved that sound. A garden gnome sat by the door. Danny's mother had collected them. Bobby's hand raised to knock, then froze. Grace watched from the car, nodding encouragement. Bobby knocked 3 times in military rhythm. 15 seconds of waiting felt eternal. The door opened. A motorized wheelchair appeared, the figure backlit by afternoon sun. Bobby's eyes adjusted slowly. Silver hair, weathered face, but unmistakably. "Bobby Harrison?" Danny's voice was hoarse with disbelief. "Is that really you?" 58 years collapsed into a single moment on a quiet Idaho porch. Meanwhile, Danny had been preparing since Grace's phone call 2 days earlier. The news that Bobby knew he was alive had ended 58 years of waiting. Danny had cleaned obsessively, arranged photos carefully, including one of Bobby and himself in 1965, young and whole. He'd placed Kate's sealed envelope on the coffee table where Bobby would see it. Another envelope sat beside it, Danny's own letter written 40 years ago but never delivered. Danny carried his own guilt, survivor's guilt, the question of why he lived when others didn't. His wheelchair was a daily reminder of war's cost. But years of VA counseling and support groups had taught him forgiveness, first of himself, then of circumstances beyond anyone's control. Now Bobby needed to learn the same lesson. After his discharge, Danny had become a physical therapist specializing in veteran rehabilitation. His mission was helping others like himself. Dozens of veterans had regained mobility because of him. His philosophy was simple. Every day alive is a gift. Use it to help others. But privately, he'd carried the pain of losing his best friend, or believing he had. Kate's first contact in 1982 had been a lifeline when Danny struggled. Their 30-year correspondence wasn't just about Bobby, they'd supported each other. Kate had helped financially, paying for the wheelchair ramp, among other things. Emotionally, she'd listened when Danny needed someone who understood the weight of loving someone trapped in trauma. Together, they'd strategized, planned, waited for the right moment. Now, hearing Bobby's knock, Danny's heart raced. He wheeled to the door, hands shaking on the controls. He paused, wiped his eyes, whispered to himself, "This is it. 58 years." He opened the door, saw Bobby, and both men began to cry. "Bobby Harrison?" Danny's voice cracked with disbelief. "Is it really you?" 5 seconds of silence stretched between them. Bobby couldn't speak, could only stare at the face he'd mourned for 58 years. Jesus Christ, after all this time. Danny's hands gripped his wheelchair arms, knuckles white. Bobby nodded, tears already falling. His body wanted to bend down to Danny's level, but he was uncertain of protocol, uncertain of everything. "Danny, I thought I lost you." The words came broken. "You did. For 58 years. But I'm here now. I'm so sorry. I should have—" "Stop." Danny's voice was gentle but firm. Come inside. Please. Bobby looked at the wheelchair ramp, another wave of guilt threatening to drown him. Danny noticed. I'll explain everything. Come on. The interior was neat, lived in. Walls covered with photos, military history, therapy practice pictures, a life fully lived despite limitations. On the coffee table, Bobby noticed an envelope with familiar handwriting. Kate's handwriting. Danny positioned his wheelchair to face Bobby at equal height. Bobby sat on the couch across, maintaining distance. Grace appeared in the doorway. Mr. Sullivan, I'm Grace. I know. We've talked. Danny smiled at her. Thank you for bringing him. Grace understood they needed privacy. I'll make coffee. When she'd gone to the kitchen, Bobby began, I watched you die, Danny. I know you believe that. Your eyes, you stopped moving. I was dying, Danny acknowledged. But the medevac came 8 minutes after you left. They found me still breathing. Barely. 8 minutes. The words crushed Bobby with their proximity to different history. Danny told his story methodically. 6 months in a coma at Walter Reed. Waking with no memory, taking months to even recall Bobby's name. Relearning to talk, to think. By the time he could write Bobby's name, Bobby had vanished, discharged, moved, unreachable. I spent 10 years trying to find you. Wrote everyone in our unit. Every letter came back. Address unknown. Bobby explained his own flight, coming home in 1968, unable to stay anywhere, moving 7 times in 5 years, finally finding Riverside, stopping running, meeting Kate in 1970. Never talking about the war, not to anyone, living with guilt every single day. November 14th, I drink bourbon. Remember you? Danny pointed to a photo on the bookshelf. Bobby stood, approached, and felt his world tilt again. Kate, younger, maybe 50, standing beside Danny in his wheelchair. The photo was dated on the back, 1989. She found me, Danny said quietly. Tracked me down. Bobby's shock registered physically, a step backward, hand bracing against the wall. Danny explained about the 1982 op-ed he'd written for a veterans magazine. The survivors no one knows about. His story of being listed as killed in action but actually surviving. Kate had read it in the library where she worked. She'd recognized his name, the unit, connected the pieces. Her first letter had been simple. Mrs. Catherine Harrison, I believe you knew my husband in Vietnam. In 1989, Kate had flown to Idaho, met Danny face to face. Her stated purpose was understanding Bobby's trauma so she could help him. Danny had agreed, wanting to help Bobby even from a distance. They'd formed a connection, 2 people loving the same broken man, sharing the burden of his pain, monthly letters for 30 years. Kate asking about Bobby's progress, his setbacks, Danny providing perspective from someone who'd been there, strategy sessions about timing of revelation. Kate's occasional visits always kept secret. The wheelchair ramp Bobby had noticed, Kate had paid for it. The receipt was visible in the photo frame. You both decided I couldn't handle the truth? Bobby's voice held edge now. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? It was love, Bobby. She loved you too much to hurt you. Lying for 30 years is love? Waiting for 30 years is. The anger Bobby felt was new, fresh, different from the dull guilt he'd carried. This was sharp, immediate. He'd been treated like a child, like someone too fragile for reality. Grace emerged from the kitchen, sensing tension. Grandpa, there's more you need to understand. But Danny was already shifting topics, sensing Bobby needed redirection before the anger consumed understanding. Bobby, do you know how that bullet got inside you? Enemy fire. During the attack. No, let me tell you what really happened. Danny described the night before battle, his ritual with the lucky bullet, carving it by flashlight with his combat knife. The superstition that if this bullet killed an enemy, he'd survive. The promise he carved, brother's keeper. During the battle, Danny had seen everything Bobby missed. An enemy soldier flanking Bobby from behind while Bobby focused on the threat in front. A clear shot. Danny had fired, his lucky bullet, the one with the engraving. The bullet hit center mass. The enemy soldier fell, but bullets fragment on impact. A piece deflected at an angle, toward Bobby's position, into Bobby's neck from the right side. You thought enemy fire hit you, Danny said. But that was my bullet. The fragment that saved your life by killing the man about to kill you. Bobby stared, recalculating everything. I saw you go down, Danny continued, voice thick with memory. I thought I'd killed you. Then the mortar hit my position. Everything went dark. The dual perspective clarified. Bobby thought the enemy had shot him, then Danny died. Danny shot the enemy, saw Bobby hit by his own bullet's fragment, felt relief that Bobby was alive, then suffered his own devastating injury. Both men had carried incomplete memories. Both had blamed themselves for failing the other. The truth, Danny's bullet had saved Bobby. Then the mortar had nearly killed Danny. Brother's keeper had been fulfilled literally, but at terrible cost. Bobby's hand covered his mouth, processing. For 58 years he'd carried a piece of Danny without knowing. The guilt that shaped every decision, destroyed his ability to be present for his family, stolen his peace. It was based on misunderstanding. He hadn't failed Danny. Danny had succeeded in protecting him. You saved my life, Bobby whispered, and you saved mine. You held my hand. I remember that. You didn't leave until they made you. But I left. Following orders saved both of us. I was dying. The medevac came because you marked the position before they extracted you. Bobby knelt in front of the wheelchair. Danny's hands found his shoulders. Both men cried without words, without shame. Grace captured the moment with her phone, witnessing 58 years of grief releasing. Grace's voice broke the silence. Grandpa, there's something else. She showed him a photo. Michael, teenage and awkward, standing beside Danny, dated 1995. Michael knew? Bobby's face showed fresh betrayal. Kate brought him. Thomas, too, later. The revelation expanded, not just his wife. His sons had known for 29 years. Everyone protecting him or excluding him, Bobby couldn't tell which. On the coffee table, Kate's envelope waited with answers he wasn't sure he wanted. Bobby stood abruptly, the photo of teenage Michael trembling in his hand. Who else? Tell me who else knew I was suffering while you all kept secrets? Danny hesitated, and that pause told Bobby everything. Everyone, Bobby said flatly. My whole family. Bobby, please sit down. Tell me. The force in Bobby's voice made Grace flinch. Danny exhaled slowly. Michael since 1995. He was 16. Thomas met me in 1998, also 16. Kate thought they needed to understand their father to break the cycle of distance. They've known for 29 years. Bobby's voice dropped to something hollow. My sons, meeting with you, updating you about me while I... He couldn't finish. They loved you, Danny said. They were trying to protect you. Bobby laughed bitterly. Protect me. Everyone keeps saying that. He turned on Grace. You too. How long? Grace's tears answered before her words. 2 years. I found the letters when I was 21. 2 years. Bobby's hands shook. You manipulated the surgery. Everything. Grandpa, I wanted to help. By lying? By treating me like I'm too broken to handle truth? Bobby paced, each step driven by decades of suppressed anger finding release. Did you all laugh at me? Poor Bobby, too fragile for reality? Never, Danny said firmly. It was never like that. Then what was it? Bobby wheeled on him. What gives any of you the right to decide what I can handle? You all watched me suffer. My own son saw me drowning and said nothing. For decades. The full weight crashed over him. The distance from Michael and Thomas hadn't been just his fault. They'd known about his unnecessary guilt, his pointless suffering. They'd watched him commemorate Danny's death every November 14th with bourbon and isolation. They'd let him waste years. If you all knew, Bobby said quietly, dangerously. Why did no one tell me? And when was the right time? When I was dead? Silence answered him, because there was no good answer. Only waiting for readiness that never came. I've been alone for 58 years, Bobby continued, but I was really alone in my own family. You all had each other. You all had the truth. I had nothing. Bobby, Danny started. I need air. Bobby moved toward the door. I need to leave. Don't go like this. Like what? Angry? I have the right. Bobby's hand found the doorknob. You've all made decisions for me my entire adult life. Now I make one. I'm leaving. Grace stood. Grandpa, please. You orchestrated surgery without telling me why. You manipulated everything. Bobby looked at his granddaughter, seeing her clearly for the first time. I thought you were helping, but you were controlling, just like Kate, just like everyone. Let him go, Danny said quietly to Grace. He needs space. Bobby walked out with dignity intact, down the ramp into the cooling Idaho evening. Grace stood torn between following and staying. Danny's expression was sad, but understanding. Will he come back? Grace whispered. Eventually. He has to process 58 years of truth in one day. That takes time. Bobby walked aimlessly through residential streets. Night fell. Cold settled in. His surgical wound ached from tension. His thoughts spiraled through everything he'd believed, everything that had been stolen, everyone who'd betrayed him. 58 years of guilt might not have been his fault, but they'd been stolen anyway. Kate, had she loved him or pitied him? His sons? What relationship did they have if it was built on lies? Grace, he'd trusted her, and she'd manipulated him from the start. Danny, his best friend, had participated in the conspiracy. Maybe ignorance had been easier. Maybe he'd been better off not knowing. Maybe everyone would have been better off if he'd died in Ia Drang. The thoughts grew darker as he walked. At 71, too old to rebuild a life on new foundations. What was left, if everything was a lie? Back at Danny's house, Grace collapsed into tears. I broke him. Danny handed her an envelope, yellowed with age. This is from Kate, to you, written before she died. Grace read with shaking hands. Instructions, strategy. Kate had planned for Grace to be the catalyst, knowing Bobby would need to be pushed. The letter ended. When Bobby is 70 or older, force the issue. He'll be angry. Let him be. Then he'll heal. She used me too, Grace whispered. She trusted you, Danny corrected. Knew you'd be strong enough. But I wasn't. Look what I did. Bobby's not broken, Grace. He's processing. Give him time. He'll come back. On the coffee table, Kate's letter to Bobby waited, sealed, holding answers to questions he wasn't ready to ask. Bobby walked for 2 hours through Twin Falls neighborhoods. 9 p.m. became 11 p.m. The Idaho night grew cold and he was underdressed. His neck throbbed where the surgeon's blade had cut. But he kept walking, circling back repeatedly near Danny's street, unable to leave but not ready to return. His hand found the bullet fragment in his pocket. Grace had given it to him before he'd stormed out. He touched it repeatedly, the metal worn smooth by decades inside his body, Danny's carved promise tangible beneath his fingertips. Memory surfaced unbidden. Kate's last words before the cancer took her. "Find peace about Danny, Bobby. Let him go." He'd thought she meant accept Danny's death, make peace with the guilt, stop the annual bourbon ritual and move forward. But she'd meant something entirely different. Find the living Danny. Let go of the false memory. She'd known she was dying, known Bobby would need Danny after she was gone. The timing hadn't been accidental. She'd given Danny the sealed letter in 2011, a year before her death, planned for Bobby to find out afterward, when her absence would force him to work through feelings without being able to confront her. Strategic, even in death. Protecting him even from beyond the grave. The anger that had sustained his walking began transforming into something more complex. Not control, protection, not lies, patience, not betrayal, strategy with medical justification. Kate had consulted professionals about timing. She'd carried his burden alone for decades. She'd supported him through his distance without complaint. Her pain, loving a man who couldn't be present, watching him suffer unnecessarily while keeping the solution secret. The loneliness of that vigil. She died without seeing her plan fulfilled, died trusting Bobby would eventually be ready. That faith in him, maintained across years and beyond death, struck him with new force. He'd asked the wrong question. Not why did she lie, but how did she bear it? Bobby found himself standing outside Danny's house at 11:15 p.m., lights still on. They were waiting, Grace and Danny, keeping vigil the way Kate had kept vigil for 30 years. He knocked softly. Danny opened the door immediately, relief flooding his face. "Welcome home, brother." Grace jumped up, threw her arms around Bobby. "Grandpa, I'm so sorry." "I needed to think." Bobby held her. "That's all." Danny gestured to the coffee pot. "Still hot. Want some?" The normalcy of the offer, comfort through routine, steadied Bobby. He nodded. They sat in the living room, three people connected by loss and love and Kate's intricate planning. On the coffee table, the envelope with Kate's handwriting waited. "I want to understand," Bobby said finally. "All of it." Danny pointed to the envelope. "Kate left this for you. It explains everything." Bobby stared at his wife's familiar handwriting. 12 years since her death. 12 years this letter had waited. His hand shook as he picked it up. Grace started to offer help, but Bobby shook his head. "Her words. My ears." The paper was yellowed slightly, dated March 2011. Bobby broke the seal and began reading. He could hear Kate's voice in every word. "My dearest Bobby, my love, my heart. If you're reading this, it means you found Danny. I can see your face, confused, angry, feeling betrayed. Let me explain everything, and I hope you'll understand, even if you can't forgive. In 1982, I read an article in a veterans magazine. The Survivors No One Knows About, by Daniel Sullivan. He wrote about being listed as killed in action, but surviving. I recognized his name immediately from the few times you'd said it in nightmares. I cried for 3 hours after reading it. I wanted to tell you that instant. But Bobby, that was November 1982. You were fragile that year. On November 14th, I found you with your father's pistol. You said you'd been thinking about whether anyone would miss you. I hid the gun. I didn't sleep for a week. If I'd told you then that Danny was alive, the shock might have killed you. Not physically, but psychologically. I chose you living with guilt over you dying from shock. I consulted Dr. Morrison at the VA. He's a trauma specialist. He told me something that changed everything. Mr. Harrison's guilt is structural to his psyche now. Remove it suddenly, and the entire personality collapses, like removing a supporting wall from a house. Dr. Morrison gave me a plan. Watch for signs of readiness, talking about the war, seeking veteran connections, accepting help. He estimated 20 to 30 years before you might be ready. I committed to however long it takes. I contacted Danny because I needed to understand you. The war had taken you from me, and I didn't know how to reach across that distance. Danny gave me a window into your trauma. He became my confidant about you, and I became his connection to you. We held each other up while waiting for you to be ready. I helped him financially. He needed wheelchair access, and I had my father's insurance money. He helped me emotionally, talking me through your worst nights when you'd wake screaming or wouldn't speak for days. I brought Michael to meet Danny in 1995 because Michael was becoming distant like you. I couldn't let the trauma pass to another generation. Thomas, too, later. They needed to know their father wasn't weak. You were carrying a wound that wouldn't heal because it was based on a lie. Danny taught them patience, taught them to love you through your absence. Your sons became better men because of him. I watched you for 30 years, looking for signs you were ready, but you never talked about the war, never sought help, never reached out. Decades passed. Then I got my cancer diagnosis in 2010, and I knew I was running out of time. I had to trust you'd be ready after I was gone. My presence would have complicated it. You'd focus on me instead of healing. Sometimes we have to lose someone to find ourselves. I chose Grace at her birth, Bobby. I saw something in her, my stubbornness, your heart. I left her instructions. When you turned 70, she was to force the issue. She's strong enough to break you open so you can heal. Danny told me about the lucky bullet, about carving Brother's Keeper the night before Aya Drang. I knew someday surgery would reveal it. I prayed the physical proof would make you believe what your mind refused to accept. Brother's Keeper worked both ways, Bobby. He protected you with that bullet. You protected him by marking the medevac position. You saved each other. I love you. I have always loved you. Not despite your guilt, but through it. I married a ghost, but I never gave up on the man inside. You thought you were protecting us by staying distant. I was protecting you by staying present even when you didn't notice. I saw you, Bobby. Always saw you, even when you couldn't see yourself. Forgive yourself. You did nothing wrong. Danny's alive because of you. I had a life because of you. Now go live your life. Really live it. Danny's been waiting 58 years. Don't make him wait longer. And Bobby? He forgave you decades ago. Time you do the same. Come home from that jungle, my love. I'll be waiting for you. But not yet. Live first. All my love, always and forever. Your Kate. P.S. The bullet fragment. Keep it. Frame it. Remember what it means. Brother's keeper. You kept each other. Now keep living. Bobby read through tears, each word landing like absolution. When he finished, he held the letter to his chest, Grace and Danny crying in sympathy. She chose you, Bobby said to Grace finally, before you were born. Grace nodded, pulling out her own letter from Kate. She said I was the bridge between past and future. Bobby pulled his granddaughter close. You were doing what she asked. I'm sorry I called it manipulation. It was love, like hers. He turned to Danny. You waited 58 years. You were worth waiting for. I wasn't. I was angry, distant, broken. You were my brother. That's all that mattered. Bobby knelt again before Danny's wheelchair. Danny's hand settled on Bobby's head in something like benediction. "I'm sorry," Bobby whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Nothing to forgive. You saved my life. You saved mine. With your bullet. Then we're even. After 58 years, we're even." They held each other while Grace documented the moment, but also became part of it, joining the embrace when Bobby extended his arm. "She brought us together," Bobby said. "Even from beyond," Grace added. "That was always her gift," Danny agreed. Bobby sat back, something like peace beginning to settle. "I thought I was carrying guilt, but I was carrying love. Your promise, her patience, Grace's determination. The bullet wasn't a wound, it was a reminder. Brother's keeper. I was never alone." Danny reached for another envelope, this one more yellowed, dated 1984. "I have something too. My letter to you, written 40 years ago when I couldn't find you. Kate asked me to give it to you when you were ready." Bobby took it with reverent hands. Danny's younger handwriting covered the pages. "Bobby, my brother, my friend, if you're reading this, you know I survived. I don't know if you'll forgive me for not finding you sooner. I tried. God, I tried. Waking from the coma, I didn't remember you at first. Your name came back in month 3. When I remembered, I cried for days. I wondered if you knew I lived. Worse, I wondered if you blamed yourself for my death. Knowing you might be suffering killed me more than the wounds. Bobby, if you're blaming yourself, stop. You did everything right. You held my hand. You called for help. You marked the position. The medevac found me because of you. You saved my life by following orders and getting extracted. If you'd stayed, we'd both be dead. You made the right choice. The only choice. I fired that shot to save you. I saw the enemy behind you. You were about to die. I fired my lucky round. It killed him. The fragment hit you. I saw you go down. I thought I'd killed you. Then the mortar hit me. Last thought before darkness. I killed Bobby." Waking up, my first question was, did Bobby survive? Learning you did was the only thing that kept me going through recovery. I became a physical therapist because of you. Every veteran I help, I think of us. I'm not bitter about the wheelchair. I'm grateful for every day. I wish I could have shared them with you, but knowing you're out there living is enough. Bobby, forgive yourself. Please, I never blamed you. Not for 1 second. You were my best friend. You still are. If we meet again, know this. You owe me nothing, but I owe you everything. Brother's keeper, always. Your Danny." Bobby finished reading, tears of a different quality now, not grief, but release, understanding complete. 58 years both men had suffered unnecessarily, both blaming themselves for saving each other. Love expressed as guilt, but they'd never been apart, not really. The bullet had kept them connected all along. Now the emotional connection was restored. None of them slept. They talked through the night, trading stories, filling 58 years of gaps. At 5:30 a.m., they moved to Danny's porch to watch sunrise approach. Bobby sat in a chair beside Danny's wheelchair. Grace curled in a third chair with a blanket. The Idaho sky lightened with promise. Minutes passed in comfortable silence. Presence was enough. Grace woke fully, saw them peaceful together, and took a photo, silhouettes against the dawn sky. She didn't post it. This moment belonged only to them. Grace made coffee, brought 3 cups to the porch. Steam rose in the cold morning air. "How's the neck?" Danny asked. "Sore, but lighter. Bullets out. Metaphorically, too." Bobby smiled faintly. "Took 58 years to get surgery." "Worth it?" Bobby paused, considering honestly. "Yes. Everything led here. They discussed Kate, Bobby's voice breaking as he spoke. I wish she could see this. She knew, Danny said. That's why she planned it, Grace added quietly. She's watching, Grandpa. I believe that. She was smarter than all of us, Bobby admitted. Loved me more than I knew. She loved you enough to let you be broken until you could heal properly, Grace said. That's a terrible kind of love. It's the truest kind, Danny countered. Bobby shifted topics. I need to talk to Michael and Thomas. They're scared you'll be angry, Grace warned. I'm not anymore, mostly. Bobby rubbed his face. When are they coming? Tomorrow. I already called them. Bobby laughed without bitterness. Of course you did. Grandma taught me to plan ahead. Danny asked, how long can you stay? Bobby's instinct said to leave, to run as he'd always run. But something new inside him spoke louder. A week, if you'll have me. Brother, I'd have you for 58 more years. The sunrise painted the sky gold and pink. All three watched in silence. Bobby reached for his pocket where the bullet fragment usually rested, then remembered. Grace held it out to him. Keep it, Bobby said, for now. Why? I don't need to carry it anymore, but don't lose it. Danny asked, what will you do with it eventually? I'll know when it's time. The week that followed brought healing in small increments. Days 5 and 6, Bobby and Danny traded memories of 5 decades lived separately. Bobby spoke of his teaching career, the students who'd loved him without knowing his pain, the literature that had kept him tethered to humanity when guilt threatened to pull him under. Danny shared stories of the veterans he'd helped through physical therapy, lives changed because he'd transformed his own trauma into purpose. They laughed at old jokes from Vietnam that remained funny despite everything. They found rhythm together, the easy companionship of men who'd faced death side by side. Grace cooked from Kate's recipe cards, following her grandmother's instructions for meals Bobby loved. You Send Me by Sam Cooke played on Danny's old record player. Bobby stood and danced alone in the living room, honoring Kate's memory with movement she'd always loved to see. On day 7, Michael and Thomas arrived from Seattle. They entered Danny's house with guilt written across their faces, unsure of their reception. Bobby saw them, stood, and opened his arms. The hug was their first in decades. Michael cried openly. Thomas held on like a drowning man finding shore. Kate was right to tell you, Bobby said when they finally separated. I wish I'd been stronger so she could have told me too. Dad, we just wanted you to be okay, Michael managed. I know. I understand now. Thomas added, we should have defied her. Told you anyway. Bobby shook his head. Then it wouldn't have happened like this. This was the right time. He introduced them to Danny properly, not as the ghost haunting their father, but as the man himself. The sons met their father's past made real, understanding for the first time the full weight of what Bobby had carried. Your father saved my life, Danny told them. He never told us that, Michael said. Never told us anything. He was protecting you from his pain. The understanding that passed between the sons and Danny was profound. They saw their father not as weak or distant, but as wounded in ways they were only beginning to comprehend. Days 8 and 9, Danny showed Bobby his therapy center where he worked with veterans. Bobby met men Danny had helped, men who thanked him through tears for giving them hope when they'd had none. Bobby saw the impact of Danny's life, how trauma had been transformed into purpose. I taught books, Bobby said with something like regret. You taught healing. You taught too, Danny replied, just differently. Every student you helped, every life you touched through literature, that was healing too. Grace bonded with her uncles, the family reunifying in ways that had seemed impossible a week before. They took photos, 5 people across 3 generations standing on Danny's porch with the Idaho landscape behind them. On day 10, Bobby was ready to return to Montana, not running this time, but leaving with the intention to return. "You'll come back?" Danny asked. "Try to stop me." They made plans. Thanksgiving in Montana with Danny visiting for the first time. The role reversal felt significant, Bobby hosting instead of fleeing. The drive home was different from the journey there. Grace and Bobby sat in comfortable silence, the tension replaced by peace. Bobby looked at the landscape, really seeing Montana's beauty for the first time in years. "How do you feel, Grandpa?" "Different. Lighter. Like I can breathe fully for the first time." Arriving home, the house looked different, or perhaps Bobby saw it differently. Neighbors welcomed him back. Word had spread through the small town, as it always did. Veterans stopped by, acknowledging Bobby's service. For the first time in 40 years, Bobby accepted their thanks. He finally sat at Kate's desk, put on her reading glasses, and read her journals. Page after page revealed the depth of her sacrifice, her private thoughts about loving a man who couldn't be present. Understanding settled over him like grace. In Kate's garden, the forget-me-nots bloomed. Bobby began tending them, working the soil with his hands, finding meditation in small acts of care. In his study, Bobby made changes. The military photo moved to a prominent place on the wall. Beside it, he hung the new photo of himself and Danny from that first dawn in Idaho. Grace returned the bullet fragment. Bobby planned to frame it, not hide it anymore. He donated his turtleneck collection to charity, bought new clothes with open collars. The scar at his neck became visible to the world, a badge of honor instead of shame. 6 months later, November 2024, Riverside held its annual Veterans Day Parade. Bobby had avoided it for 40 years. This year, he attended. Danny flew in, specially. The organizing committee had asked Bobby to be Grand Marshal. His first instinct was to refuse, but Danny's encouragement changed his mind. "Time to be seen, brother." "Together," Bobby insisted. "We do it together." Main Street was decorated with flags. Hundreds of townspeople lined the route. Veterans from various wars marched in formation. Bobby and Danny led the parade in a convertible, Danny's wheelchair decorated with their unit insignia. Bobby wore Kate's blue chambray shirt. The framed bullet fragment sat displayed on the dashboard. At the ceremony, the mayor invited Bobby to speak. He hadn't prepared remarks, but walked to the microphone anyway. He saw Grace, his sons, Danny, grandchildren, the whole community watching. His voice shook, then steadied. He thanked the community, told his story, not every detail, but the essence. Thought he'd lost his best friend, lived 58 years with guilt. Surgery revealed truth, found his friend alive. "We're never as alone as we think," Bobby said. "To every veteran here suffering in silence, you're not alone. Reach out, let people help. Don't wait 58 years like I did." He spoke about Kate. "My wife loved me through my brokenness. That's heroism too." About Grace. "Young people can heal us if we let them." About Danny. "Brother's keeper isn't just a phrase. It's a promise we keep." He concluded, "Welcome home to every veteran. You're home, you're safe, you're loved." The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Veterans approached afterward, sharing their own stories. Bobby listened, really listened, making eye contact, offering the understanding he'd never accepted for himself. When the national anthem played, Bobby saluted the flag. Danny held his hand over his heart. Both men had tears, but both were smiling. 1 year later, November 2025, Bobby's transformation was complete. He volunteered at the VA hospital as a peer counselor, helping veterans struggling with survivor's guilt. He showed them the bullet fragment, told his story, opened doors for dozens of men to share their own pain. He partnered with Danny's therapy center remotely and began writing a memoir, Brother's Keeper, a 58-year journey home. Danny visited Montana every 3 months, staying in Bobby's guest room, now fully accessible after Bobby renovated it. They fished together using adapted equipment, cooked meals side by side, talked for hours about everything and nothing. Grace excelled in her 2nd year of medical school, choosing trauma surgery as her specialty. Her research studied physical manifestations of psychological trauma. Her TED Talk about Bobby's story went viral, sparking national conversations about veteran mental health. Michael taught high school like his father, incorporating war discussions into his curriculum. Thomas became a therapist, specializing in family trauma. Both sons visited regularly, relationships rebuilt on foundations of truth instead of secrets. The bullet fragment lived in a display case on Bobby's study wall. Beside it, Kate's letter and Danny's letter were framed. Below them, a plaque read, Brother's Keeper, November 14, 1965, a promise kept. November 14, 2025, was no longer a day of bourbon and isolation. Instead, Bobby celebrated with Danny, Grace, his sons, and grandchildren. They toasted fallen comrades, then toasted life. 60 years ago today, we survived, Bobby said. Today, we live. Brother's Keeper, Danny responded. Always, everyone echoed. That evening, they gathered on Bobby's porch for sunset. 7 people across 3 generations. Grace took a photo and posted it. #Brothers Keeper number 60 years later, never too late to heal. The post went viral. Millions viewed it. Thousands shared similar stories. A movement began, conversations about veteran mental health spreading across the nation. As the sun set, Bobby and Danny sat side by side, 2 old men finally at peace. We made it, brother, Bobby said. We always did, Danny replied. Together. Inside the window, the bullet fragment caught the last light. The engraving was visible. DS 11-14-65, Brother's Keeper. The promise, kept across 60 years, 2 wars, 1 life divided and restored. They'd found their way home at last. Bobby's story reminds us that the wounds we carry aren't always visible, and the guilt we bear isn't always deserved. How many of us have spent years, decades even, believing we failed someone, only to discover the truth was far different from what we remembered? The weight of unspoken pain can shape every relationship, every choice, every November 14th we face alone with our regrets. But here's what Bobby and Danny teach us. It's never too late to find healing. Not at 71. Not after 58 years. Not when you think you've waited too long. The brother you thought you'd lost might be waiting in Idaho. The wife who kept secrets might have been building you a bridge. The granddaughter pushing you toward truth might be saving your life. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop running from our past and finally let people love us through our brokenness. The bullet fragment that Bobby carried wasn't just shrapnel. It was a promise kept across time, a reminder that we're never as alone as we believe. What burden have you been carrying that might not be yours to carry anymore? Is there someone from your past you've been afraid to reach out to? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be the permission someone else needs to start their own journey home.